Today we have a very special guest on our show. This man needs no introduction. He is a film director, producer, writer extraordinaire, Roman Coppola.
It's my
Welcome.
pleasure. Thank you.
How are you? How are your family doing with what's going on in California with the pandemic?
We're very blessed. And I feel a bit embarrassed because there's so much turmoil and so many people are suffering so deeply. It's hard to reconcile that with my experience, but I'm living here in the Napa Valley. The weather has been beautiful and we're all, segregated here. I'm with my immediate family. And so I have my kids and they have their cousins to play with and we're all here together. And so it has been a real blessing. I think a lot of people have experienced this, tendency or whatever that we're with our families, we're all gathering, we're have other priorities are coming to light. And in my life, that's very much the case. And so, there are days that are a little difficult for whatever reason, but by and large, this has been an incredible experience to be more in the moment. I've never been had a weeks go by or months go by without having to travel somewhere, going here, going there. So it's just a real moment to catch your breath and kind of get realigned. So that's been my experience.
I've been kind of perplexed about maybe taking a little bit more time off to kind of be with family instead of submerge myself into some projects. I've been working remotely, but been kind of, I don't want to say enjoying the time and come off, insensitive to what's going on, but just enjoying the moment to be around the family while there's a little bit of downtime because I usually come from a very hectic kind of work environment, and I'm assuming you do as well. So that's why it's nice to take a breath.
Our immediate family's together, and so we're spending a lot of time. And as I mentioned, my kids are really, getting a big kick out of being with their cousins so much. And it's summer, of course, so now there's that feeling of summer vacation. So, yeah, it's been a real blessing. And my work has been, I have a lot of different facets of my work because I work, on screenplays, and that can happen remotely. So Wes and I have been doing some writing work during this time, so that's familiar and not so much different than the way we've done in the past, as we're often doing that on the phone. I have not really produced any shoots of note, but interestingly, my brother-in-law is one of the main band members, or sort of collective of this band Phoenix, and he wanted to shoot a little something for a release that's coming out of a song. And so he said, "Oh, will you help me shoot something?" And we just grabbed a camera and did a little shoot, which was kind of fun and very informal. So there are little bits of work that are happening, but much of my time is spent. I guess everything's quite familiar and similar, except that I don't have the experience of going onto a set and shooting in that professional way that I'm accustomed to doing. It's more preparatory and, of course, Zoom calls and stuff like that. But I've been relatively busy. I'm not sure if you asked me that question, but kind of doing a smattering of work in this way.
That's why I'm kind of curious as far as with family life. Does your family, are your kids too young enough to embrace what you do, or they're kind of asking questions and you would love to kind of get them a little bit more involved?
My
What?
daughter's 9, my elder son is 7, and my younger son is 4. So they're pretty young, and they've always been around. As I've done different projects, we'll visit a set or be aware of this and that. And my work life, and you kind of alluded to it in the intro, but it's pretty um, peripatetic, if that's the right word. I do a lot of different kind of things, and maybe one year I'd be very actively involved with Mozart in the Jungle, which is a show that was involved with Amazon. And so the kids like, "Oh yeah, Daddy did that Mozart movie," and then some other project or a commercial. So they're to answer your question, they've been around and been aware that I'm in this kind of field that involves filmmaking and working with Wes, because oftentimes we've been together with all our families writing or doing some preparation. So they're tuned in. I do enjoy it when they get to visit a set, or they can sit on the dolly, or see things evolve, because that's something that I remember. So it's always nice, when as you relive experiences that you had as a kid through the eyes of your own kids. But in this recent time, to be honest, I'll be on the phone with Wes or something like that, but it's not so interactive with my children. So they're not like observing me do a whole lot of stuff in particular during this time. Just as more discussion driven than actually making things.
Well, you mentioned something right off the bat about being involved in sets at an early age. Was that the life for you? I mean, I've done some research where I found out you were involved in certain films. Obviously, with the Godfather series, you were an extra. With Apocalypse Now, your family was over there for quite some time. Were you always on film sets and intrigued about what your father was doing as a craft, or was you just kind of living a typical childhood, and it just so happens your father was involved in some serious films? What was that like?
It's tricky because people have asked me that, and there's a kind of curiosity because it seems exotic. And it's hard to really answer because the life that you experience is normal to you, even if it's maybe exotic. And so I can't really comment in any very objective way, but we did. My dad is a very family oriented person. There's my mom walking by.
Oh, excellent.
I've been interviewed for a creative. Yes, nothing. So there's Mom.
Excellent. Hello.
Do you have any question for her?
Well, let's put you on the spot. Who was a major influence growing up?
Well, definitely my mother.
You had to say that.
Yeah.
Again, not to put you on the spot because I know Mom's there, but who was the driving force when it came to making films, when it came to making your directorial debut and writing and stuff? Was that more Mom's influence? Because I know Mom's very creative as well.
Again, it's hard to be objective, like, oh, it's this influence or that influence. I always grew up in a creative family, and there's a lot happening, and you sort of pick things up, and the fun of creating things, making things is very appealing. My mom specifically, was and continues to be a very diverse creative person. So she was a mom, very predominantly, but also a painter and a photographer. And she wrote a journal which was published. You've probably seen, that talks about her time during Apocalypse Now. She just directed a film she's probably the oldest first-time filmmaker at like 80 or 81 or whatever she was when she did that. And then she made another film recently, a group of shorts. So she's just a creative person. And so as such, definitely an influence, and she has always, fostered a sense of, making things and doing things and valuing things such, if you're a kid and you do a painting, it's like, oh, wow, that's so incredible. And, I'm looking at, like, this is my sort of sidetrack. This is my daughter made this little pencil cup, and it's the same kind of thing. Like, wow, it's so creative. It's a plastic bottle that she cut and then put, colored tape and then crinkly tape on top. And anyway, my mom's the kind of person that's like, oh my God, that's like, how did you think of that? That's so interesting. And so it's just nothing extraordinary. It's just, enthusiasm and appreciation for that creative instinct to make things. And so I digress perhaps, but my mom has always had a very diverse set of things she's made and done. And I think I sort of fit a bit in that mold, where if you look at my career and my bio, whatever, I've worked in a lot of different fields, different functions of filmmaking and other things. And I think that's largely that comes from my mom. And of course, you asked prior about my dad and his work and influence, and he's obviously a major person in my life. And growing up, on the sets of movies was, very familiar to me. And like when people think of their different, fourth grade, fifth grade, this teacher, that teacher. For me, I think of like, oh, well, we were in the Philippines for sixth grade. And then, well, Godfather 2, that was third grade. You think of things, the chapters of your life are divided up by the movies and the locations, which, it's hard to analyze or express to you guys like what that's like. But certainly, brought about a lot of stimulating experiences and memories and things that resonate for me. And so when I reflect on my life, I have a lot of, warm memories that certainly informed who I am in terms of, enjoying working with teams of people, that sense of collective and that sense of, making things, and then having a family around as I was around. So it's all, kind of familiar stuff.
It's interesting because, again, your family's so involved with being creative in all these diverse bodies of work. I mean, how are almost holidays and family gatherings? Are they film showcases? What exactly do... What I mean, just to be a fly on the wall, I'd be kind of curious. What exactly is it like at a gathering?
But it's not like a film-centric experience. I think it's interesting because we work in the film industry and there's an appreciation for that, but it's not like, it's not really a film emphasis, but more one of just kind of appreciation of the arts in general. That's maybe not mean to sound evasive, but interestingly, in this period of time where we've been here secluded in COVID, my dad did instigate a film festival. Festival's the wrong word, but a film program. Said, hey, this is a great time to sort of watch some movies. And so we have been watching on a pretty regular basis some great movie classics. And so that's really been rather fun. But I have to say that's not like some theme of growing up, like, oh, we're going to watch stimulating movies. It's a matter of course. I mean, I grew up seeing interesting movies like Buster Keaton films. We used to project on Super 8, and my dad always had an interest in videotape technology and laser discs, so we had those over the years. But there was never like a program like, oh, we're gonna watch these films as part of some
repertoire. I got it.
Yeah, but interestingly, as I said, recently we've been watching some classic movies together, which has been very fun and kind of novel.
Do you feel that creativity is always on for you, that you always find a time to, whether write or there's no roadblocks, there's no kind of, I need a little bit of time. Is it something to you as where it's almost like a light switch? It's always on?
Like I'm sort of a creative person for hire, and I like this reputation that I have with certain people where, like, if they have a need or a solution, like, we need some inventive idea, who can we call? And I'm sort of like, have a little bit of that profile where I'm a person that often in my work will be brought in to, like, say, hey, how can we solve this? Or what's a concept that will express this idea we're trying to express or whatever. So that I always have I'm pretty lucky, to knock on wood so I don't lose it, but I tend to have a pretty fertile imagination. Like if someone said, okay, we need some way to approach this problem, or how can we do this or that? Not always, but I tend to like have a sort of a imagination that is firing. And it's sort of like a crossword puzzle where you puzzle over it and then, I have a good idea. And that's something I do enjoy, having that little, being creative, like with no limitation, is very daunting because you kind of need that building block to work from. So if you said, think of a great idea, it's like, you don't know what to grab onto. But if you said, okay, we want to do an underwater shoot that is scary and has this element, whatever, then your imagination kind of grab onto it. And when those conditions are presented, I am kind of ready to rock it. Sometimes personally, because I've made a few films that are my own films, my more personal work. sometimes it can be daunting, and it's not a unique thing, but when there's just no constraint, I mean, there's always a constraint of physical ability, like how can you make something? So sometimes you obviously have to think about what's doable within your means. But when the sky's the limit, it's like, oh, you could do this, you do that. Sometimes it is a little hard to grab onto something. So I have had that issue where, for like more personal work, like, oh, it'd be fun to make a movie that was really something I wrote and generated. And that can be daunting. And recently, that hasn't been where my imagination has been going. It's been kind of waiting for a little inspiration to strike. So to answer your question, in some instances, I feel it's always kind of present and I'm ready to rock it. In other instances, sometimes, you have to wait for something to drift by that captures your imagination to jump onto.
Well, this is where I'm going to have Corey hop in as well, because this is what I found unique, where a lot of the music videos that you're involved in, I'm curious if the bands approached you like, hey, we would like this, or do you just kind of get the script and say, I'll be right back, and it's completely your vision and you just run with it? Has there been a lot of cases where that's kind of worked out, or is that not really? Do you try to find that happy balance?
Yeah, it's happened every which way. Each video has a different kind of origin story. When I was very active in that field, I would keep a little notebook or idea sheet of like, oh, it'd be fun to do this or do that. And I would sort of have ideas that were kind of bubbling in my mind because I was in that line of work. And then something would come by and I would see if there was something I could sort of latch on to it. Sometimes, like my work with the Strokes, Julian Casablancas is a very creative guy, and he, in most all the cases of the videos that we did, was sort of the generator. Like, oh, I want to do something like this. Like last night was my first video for them. It was a live TV show kind of shoot, and he said, "Oh, I'm gonna do a live TV kind of shoot." So I took that and figured it out and worked with that idea and certainly influenced it and shaped it and so on. But the kernel of the idea was his. And then in other instances, we brought up Funky Square Dance. Like that was very much an aha moment. I remember, and it's actually portrayed in the video. I remember I was sleeping in a hotel in London. I was like, oh man, what can I do with this? And then it kind of came to me in that sort of eureka feeling like, oh, I'll make a video about the idea of trying to figure out and make a video, and I can do anything. Then, and I could rattle them off. I'm trying to think of different ones, one of the videos I did that was quite popular at the time was for the President's of the United States of America. It was called Peaches. And I remember thinking, well, Spike had done, Spike Jones was sort of the main, brilliant guy thinking of all the best ideas. And I remember thinking like, he did Sabotage, which was this kind of cop movie ripoff, and everyone was so great and we all loved it. And so part of me was sort of triggering off that of like, oh, well, that's just like a fun idea. I can think of a fun idea. And so that kind of, in a way, triggered the thought of like, oh, well, I just do a kung fu action ninjas attack kind of thing. And it was sort of, kind of born from some trigger that came from seeing Sabotage, as I remember. So there's lots of different things, I'd have to go through each one, but there's no exact recipe or way they come about. A lot of times, the band is very involved, and other times not at all. It's a big mixture. Speaking of videos, I had different modes I worked in. One was structured and something that was produced with sets and lighting and whatever visual kind of production. And then I did a cluster of videos, and Sick of Myself would be one of those, it was just me and a camera, and I would just sort of observe and go with the flow. And I did a group of videos where there wasn't really a script. There was a little bit of a sense like, oh, we'll do this and do that. But I did one for a band called Butter Glory called She's Got the Action, and I just visited them with my camera and some friends, and we kind of freestyled it a bit. And that also, again, not don't know how deep you want to get into my video stuff, but there was a group of those works. One was for Arctic Monkeys, another band called Plush. That's one of my favorite artists. That was just, kind of hanging out with them and capturing what you could capture.
There's a theme, and I'm just kind of curious about, because you grew up in the 60s and 70s, and your film work has that feel. Your first film was from the 60s, and had the second film that you produced and directed was a very 70s theme. Is that something, again, from your childhood influences you with your film as well as your music video work?
It is, and I'm glad you asked, because people don't tend to ask. But yeah, I think, when I was a kid, I mean, there's different eras of being a kid, but I remember it's those early memories. Like CQ was set in 1969, 1970. And so I was like 5 years old. And so those are the first memories that I had during that time. And so that definitely was something that meant something to me. And, it was portraying some people making films, and that was something vague memory I had, growing up at that age. And then Charles Swan is set in the 70s, and so more like 75 or 74, and I was like 9 or 10. And so again, when I think of those, there's something about the experiences you have at that age are so rich and so evocative of something that they really get lodged into your psyche. And so anyway, yes, to answer your question, those kind of early sensual memories mean something. And I do have a little bit of a fetishy interest in that era between 70 and 77, like those ages of kind of being first conscious and being aware of things. And also the world of that time, and I'm biased, but there was a real exciting kind of cultural moment, this kind of pop art graphic style that you would see in the magazines. And that was what I kind of portrayed in Charles Swan again. But there's a visual style and musical style and clothing attitude that just, to me, is like kind of epitomizes cool, like the way Brian Ferry might wear his outfit, he might wear his manner. These are kind of things that are like kind of at the highest level to me.
That's the one thing I found intriguing, is that any kind of period piece is got to be difficult to do, because you have to have the continuity, you have to have that thought process and make everything just spot on. But what I found intriguing, have a story within a story. For example, your first film, CQ, is a movie within a movie. With a glimpse into Charles Swan, it felt like, again, it was a movie within a movie. It's a movie within a mindset. And there's been your commercial work that shows a little, the behind the scenes of production. And I always found that just fascinating. It's just, there's a story within a story. It's so complex. Is that what you try to do as almost like a personal challenge to yourself, to be creative, is to kind of have a lot of things in motion?
It's hard for me to quantify it. I think of that consciously. I mean, there is a part of me that likes surprise, and so I, as a kid, I always loved magic, theatrical magic, and that sense of delight and surprise and pranks and that kind of thing is just sort of one of the sensation I really enjoy is being delighted. And so I think that some of those things, and so sometimes, if you see a movie within a movie, there's a kind of like surprise, or kind of catches your imagination. I think I would connect it to that sensation. And, I don't know, not to be too heady about it, but I think, creativity is sort of just about combining two different things or more that kind of haven't been combined before, so you might have like Dali, who's epitomizes kind of inventive imagination, has like a melting watch, that was just a kind of cool, who would have thought of that, except for him. And so I think juxtaposing things and that sort of surprise you is appealing to me, and maybe where my imagination goes. So I'm not really sure if I'm linking it to what you just brought up, which is having a movie within a movie, but it kind of speaks to that, like a kind of things catalyzing by being kind of unexpected and kind of nesting boxes, have layers and so on.
We are both producers. We both like to be behind the camera. We both love to edit and tell a story. With the current environment nowadays, with technology, everything HD, cameras going from 4K, 8K to now 12K, what is your preference still with all this technology? Is it still to incorporate film in other formats, or are you kind of embracing the technology and the resolution increase? What is your kind of view as far as what you like to think is going to be the driving force as far as what's going to move forward? Is film going to make a resurgence, or you think with HD, 4K, 8K, 12K technology, that's going to be the way to incorporate cinema and filmmaking?
I'm pretty agnostic when it comes to technology. I'll use whatever. I mean, film does have a wonderful charm and a quality that is hard to really mimic. You can, but it's hard. I shot a episode for Mozart in the Jungle where we shot 16 millimeter multi-camera. And I had a lot of pushback from the studio saying, "Oh, resolution, what's it going to look like?" And I said, "Just trust me." And I kind of just pushed it on them, and it really added something. The rollouts and the flares and the handling the camera the way it's weighted, and it just felt right. And so I totally get it when it comes to shooting a film. Like I just actually saw Moonrise Kingdom again recently. The other day they showed it in my town here as a drive-in movie, and it's shot on 16, and it really has a feel that is really unique, and so I respect that the different tools and the beauty of film and so on. To be honest, I've shot with the Alexa. I bought one, and when I did Charlie Swan, I bought that camera and I used it, and I was delighted. I love that camera, and I had these old lenses, so I think I got a certain kind of hand feel and certain quality from the lenses that I chose. But I remember finishing that movie and projecting it, and like I wouldn't want it to look any better. There's something about that's 2K, I believe. 4K. There's a lot of I'll digress for a second. A lot of people talk, 4K. I was going to buy like an Apple TV for myself. Just get a 4K. My projector can't handle 4K. No movie I've ever been involved with has been finished in 4K. Grand Hotel Budapest or whatever. I'm quite certain was finished in 2K. So to me, it's a lot of distracting kind of nonsense a bit. Now, having said that, to use it, like I shot some commercials with 6K, and I had a wide shot and I got a close-up at the same time, and I could punch in, and I was able to get 2 for 1. And it was a comedy spot, and it would have really killed the momentum. It's like, okay, let's do it again and punch in. And so in that regard, it was a real fantastic tool. So without really considering what you asked in a deep way, my immediate thing is like for super high resolution, for special needs, getting coverage, it's awfully cool. But the look and feel of seeing something projected that was shot on film or shot on 2K, to me is pretty close. And to have something that's like a super high resolution, it makes me think of like ShowScan or IMAX or something, which is almost like ShowScan, I think was like 60 frames. It's like very glossy. It's kind of hard to watch. So my instinct, I think I'm old-fashioned, I'm sure I'll be proved wrong, is that super high resolution, it's almost, it takes away from the kind of hand feel of something that we appreciate about, paintings or photography. The grain, there's aberrations and stuff, and to have it just be like so glassine and like hyper real isn't necessarily good. Now, for some movie where that speaks to it or relates to it, it's fantastic. So I'm not going to pass any judgment, but for me, the high resolution thing isn't so appealing, except if you used it for a special technique, like you're projecting on a massive screen or zooming in or something like that.
Corey and I, we've worked together a little bit about our past. We were both producers and directors, and we've been involved in commercial shoots as well as corporate. And our flavor has been for the past decade is working in motorsports, mainly with motorcycles, and trying to document that, whether with high frame rate and stuff. And our biggest thing, and the whole point of this show and everything that we do, is to be creative and think about how to be a better storyteller, how to really connect with somebody. And that's what we've been kind of having this battle. Is it the latest and greatest? Is it the lens? I've after years and years of using certain lenses, I've stopped what I'm doing because I really feel that like certain lenses bring out a little bit more of my personality and storytelling through certain things. And then also just discovering my old Bolex. I had a H16 just sitting around, and I'm like, wow, I forgot I used to make old 50s style surf films. And so with that in mind, I'm like, I really want to find an excuse to bring this back into the field again. So that's why I'm always compelled to hear. There's some people that favor film, some people that favor the exact opposite and want it strictly digital. To me, I'm kind of old school. I like a little bit of analog and digital with music as well as with video. So that's why I'm very, very curious about, again, what you have as far as mixed media and thoughts.
As I said, I'm pretty agnostic. I don't have something I have to use. I do own a set of lenses that are the same type of lenses that we used on Rumblefish. So I think I have a sentimental attachment to the Zeiss Super Speeds or B Speeds for Mark 1. They have a very cool, they have a unique shutter or aperture blades. There are 9 blades, so it makes a very curious triangle-shaped bokeh effect. It's just, I like it. It doesn't really mean anything. It's not like some important gesture no one will even know. But I own these lenses, so I have it. I'm drawn to them. That's my sort of go-to lenses, but not for any other reason, just because I like them, I have them, but not to make a statement.
I know in the past you're very hands-on, again, doing duties, directing, producing, being in back of the camera, or being, holding the camera. What do you feel comfortable as far as with your storytelling, where to be in a position? Do you like to be involved in the edits as much as possible?
It really depends. I mean, when I do a commercial, which is one of the categories of my professional life, the director isn't really invited to be deeply involved with the edit. It's just kind of the way that business is structured. And I kind of, at first, it was sort of hard for me to accept that, because you feel like, geez, there's so much you can do, and it influences it so much. But I came to sort of accept that. It's not unlike the old studio system where John Ford would go shoot something and then he'd go shoot another movie and someone else would cut it and stuff. So I've sort of gotten my piece with that. In terms of pure enjoyment, when you are cutting, you have all your footage and you're putting it all together and you remember, I got that piece, and find a little solution. That's really a joyful part of making something. It's sort of like writing, but without all the stress of, what am I going to do? But it's the same kind of skill set of like putting this here, putting that there, tighten it up. So it is very pleasurable, and I enjoy it. On my features, and particularly Charlie Swan, which I pretty much cut myself. I had another collaborative editor, but I did most of the cutting. It was really fun. I really enjoyed that. It was a bit more, sometimes, as you alluded to, in cutting, you're really like finding it, you're reinventing it, and totally juxtaposing things. Generally, when I shoot a more documentary-oriented thing, you're just shooting and you have no real clarity on how it's going to come together. But for more narrative stuff that's more planned, I tend to sort of cut in the camera, and I'm pretty clear about how I feel it should go together. And it's rare that I don't continue with that plan. Maybe that's a weakness, I don't know. But I tend to sort of have a plan, execute the plan, and by and large, it falls into place the way I kind of was expecting. But to answer your question, I do enjoy editing. To me, it's really a bit more like knitting or sewing, where you're kind of, it's sort of almost the pleasure of kind of connecting things, and it isn't so much like a revelation, except for like more, as I mentioned, like a more documentary thing where you're like, geez, what do I do with all this footage and how do you even begin? And that really is like, it has more creation.
And I go back now to reference Dracula, where you were brought on board to do a lot of the visuals in camera and do certain things. Has that been kind of the mindset because of the fact that you started with film and have this experience to get it all in camera? Don't rely too much in post. It's almost maybe a peace of mind to make sure that you have certain things done. Do you try to do more in camera?
Definitely, I'm biased against CGI as if I can avoid it. It's a great tool for certain things, but anything that can be baked in is more appealing just to my sensibility, and also for the actors or performers. Things are happening that are sensual and real, whatever it may be. If there's a set transition or some, when I say set transition, meaning if the camera's whipping or whatever, like people can feel that because they have to hit their mark, and anything that makes it more fun and engaging. When there's a really hard shot with tricky movements and everything has to be in its place, and you kind of create a challenge and sort of do something in camera, people are really engaged, and then when they're engaged, they bring about more involvement, which shows. Wes is well known for doing a lot of tracking shots and kind of complicated whip pans, all kind of stuff. And, when it all comes together, it's very thrilling. People can like feel it, like, oh wow, we did it, and it's the dolly grip and it's the actors all kind of harmonizing. So I think, one of the things that is appealing, and it depends on your taste, it's appealing to me and other people seem to agree, is when something is alive, it's more authentic, or you watch a movie like, wow, it seems like they're really having a great time, or it feels real. You see a movie like Deliverance or something, and they're going down a whitewater thing, and it's not CGI. I mean, you really feel it, and you're engaged, and you're aware that it's really happening. Not that you're conscious of it, but you sense it. And so I think real things appeal to many people because you're vibing on it, and that I think that's a good pointer. People are saying, oh, how should I go about this or that? That if you can make something kind of catalyze and happen in front of the camera, whether it's two actors falling in love or kissing or whatever, you feel like it's really happening. That's very involving and very that's kind of rare, that magic to sort of ignite the screen. So that's a great thing to aspire to. And anyway, to answer your question, I am inclined, wherever possible, to do things that have that shot at being, more arresting because they're genuine.
I'm not sure how pressed for time you are, but I would love to dive into a glimpse into Charlie Swan and talking about being authentic. The casting for that, it seems like Charlie, to me, in my opinion, Charlie Sheen was made for that character. When you were coming up with creating the script, was Charlie in mind? I know that you grew up together, but how loose is that character? Is there's writing the script, was there any kind of personal attachments from you into that character, or?
Well, I'm glad you feel that way. Yeah, to me, when you're writing, sometimes you're in a bit of a bubble. Can't say I specifically wrote it for him. It was just this character. And, but then when I was like, okay, how am I going to, go about this? It was such an obvious choice for me. And I think it had to do with, I did have a relationship with him. When we were kids during Apocalypse Now, we were buddies. And, when you have a friendship with someone and you're 11, 12, 13, that's a kind of friend for life. And so I always, had that feeling of warmth to Charlie. And a lot of people, got impatient with him, like, oh, he's crazy or this or that. But I always said, no, that Charlie's a good guy, and he is a good guy. And so when I thought to cast him, to me, it was like a sort of a no-brainer. He has the charisma. He's a very talented actor. And I think anyone who can get past bias has to admit that. If you've seen his roles in a collection of movies, he's a very witty actor and a very fine actor. And so I thought that was a real ace in the whole kind of thing. Like I have an actor who's not just charming and so on, but he has a real acting ability. And then the real, tipping point was that if I'm going to make a movie, I want to do it with someone that is my guy. That's someone I have a rapport with, not just because we're friends, but he's like, oh, he's someone I can relate to and connect with because we have that history. So, and that's true with Jason, who's my cousin, and also with Bill, who I came to know in these various productions. So you kind of, you populate it, not that you should exclusively cast like friends and family, but that there's something that you vibe with when you are dealing with people you have a history with, and there's a rapport and there's a camaraderie and all that kind of stuff.
I'm kind of curious how close to the script Charlie was, because I hear in the past, like for example, Bill Murray kind of likes to play it a little aloof sometimes. Again, depending on what film he's involved in, and so that's why I'm kind of curious if Charlie had a little bit of that freedom too, or was he just pretty much on the money when it comes to being true to the script?
He was pretty true to the script. I can't recall a time where he improvised in a way that wasn't just something obvious to improve. We didn't. The shooting schedule was very tight for that film, so. Part of it was just like go and just not overthink it. So he, to my recollection, followed the script and enhanced it with his persona and probably some words that I don't recall. Bill, you're always hoping, and Jason as well, they're so funny and brilliant as comedic talents that there's always that hope, like, oh my God, I sure hope, I'm a writer and I could do my scene, but Bill does this, he's going to do something great, I sure hope. And I feel he did. He has a funny scene where he pulls an arrow out of Charlie's chest and he starts screaming, and so it's not necessarily dialogue, but it's like some instinct that he does. And he did another funny thing in the hospital room. He like got on the bed and started like flipping over and hiding himself, and these are all the things when you're shooting, it's like, oh my God, I hope that happens. And in those instances it did. So I felt very lucky.
I'm just kind of curious, with for example, with Bill, just let him go. Was that the case on Life Aquatic and the other films that you've been a part of?
We all know that Bill is a brilliant actor, comedic actor in particular, but not well beyond that. And that's sort of the whole fun of casting people that have those abilities, that you let them do their thing. I mean, Wes adheres pretty closely to his words in the script. He's got a little bit more of that kind of playwright tradition where you write something and he writes it for a reason, for whatever, it's just his reason. And someone said, oh, I think I'd rather say this than that. And by and large, he tends to say, well, that's what we have here. That's what we're going to go with. And but obviously the feeling of catching lightning in a bottle, some reaction, some interpretation that surprises you and delights you, that's kind of the whole name of the game. So for all those movies, and especially with Bill, it's a given. You don't hire him to just recite. You hire him to have that feedback that he brings. So it's pretty essential that he that we invited to do that.
To kind of segue into a little bit more lighthearted kind of question, what exactly do you do to kind of burn steam, or just to kind of do something other than being behind a camera and work?
I have different hobbies, and I have small kids, so that's kind of at the center of my personal life, things that I can think to do with them. And my son Marcello said, oh, let's build a roller coaster. So I'm not a super handyman kind of guy, but I've been getting these like online videos, like how to build a roller coaster. And so that's kind of where my brain goes. And you ask that question, like that's kind of my hobby and interest, is to do fun things with my kids. I have been doing some paintings recently. That's kind of a very relaxing, kind of casual thing. It's not done with any big motivation beyond just the sort of meditation of it. I do like music, as a kid or, in high school and such. I was in a band and I played drums. And so that's kind of how I got into music videos, because I did a video for my band that I was in. And there's definitely a part of me that, would like to, do a musical project. But I suffer, as many people do, like all these aspirations and all these to-do lists, and then you got to sort of decide each day. There's only so many hours, and how do you manage that and do the right thing?
So with that in mind, I've got to ask this because I'm going to try to find a common ground and segue. I've noticed, again, with your previous films and commercial spots, that there's a 60s and 70s style, very vintage feel. And I've also noticed that in that feel and look, the cars, the scooters, everything that's automotive is quite unique for that time period. And so I beg the question: is that again another personal touch that you introduce in your films and commercial spots? That vintage car look, that unique kind of time period, because it begs the question: are you a car guy, or are you a motorcycle guy? Do you ride? Do you have a collection?
I do love cars. I have a group of various cars that I get a kick out of. And I do have some motorcycles too, so we could talk about that. I have a very rare motorcycle that I just got it going again. It's called a Romeo. It's a Italian motorcycle that's like, I don't know, it's like 40 cc. It's very small. It's for like a little kid. Wow. I got it when I was a kid. But I like cars. For me, what drives my interest in cars is like, what's the experience I'm going to have in that car? So I had a little MGA, 1958 MGA, which I would putt around. It's not very fast or safe, but it was like you're just like in a little, like riding a chair around, and it's convertible, and you're looking around. And then I had this DeVille, a 99 Cadillac DeVille that was like this kind of super sedan bubble with a great stereo. I have a Lincoln Continental limo, 1968 limo. I have a Meharry, which is a Citroen. I have a lot of kind of different cars. So that, to me, they kind of have a purpose or a place. I just recently got a Corvair, a 65 Corvair Corsa, which is really cool. So I do love cars. I'm not so handy to work on them, but that's something I enjoy. I think living in California is something you kind of have to get with.
From an early age, and I blame George Lucas for this obsession, is that watching American Graffiti, I was enthused with those period of cars, and still to this day, and that's what kind of grew my interest. And really, to what I'm doing now is through films. It's been that admiration at an early age of like, wow, this is so cool and glamorous, and this is the it thing. And to me, that was the end all be all. I've always had a interest in the technical aspects of motorcycles and different motorcycles from around the world. That's why I was kind of curious, if you had a mainly Italian collection of bikes. I started to kind of go down that route and realized I'm slowly going to go broke. I can't keep a family and a motorcycle collection at the same time. It just doesn't make sense.
In this period of COVID and stuff, I've been reflecting on possessions, and I have stuff, I have like a home in LA and a vacation home and this and that, and you sort of realize priorities. And so I'm a little bit in a mood to shed things. I'm kind of, I am kind of a collector by nature, but there's part of me that's, reflecting on what I really need to have, which is much less than I actually have. So, anyway, but I do like stuff, to me, I kind of like a bargain. So like, you could have one beautiful Ferrari or whatever, but to me, like I had an MGA, it's not that expensive, and I had this really cool limo, I still have it, that didn't cost really that much. And so there's to have all these diverse things that aren't so precious and valuable that you have to be uptight about it, but you can enjoy. It's sort of more my style. And also beautiful things, like in terms of motorcycles, I have a nice Bultaco Persang, which is really
nice,
cool, and I don't know. Some of the things are just kind of a sculpture where you just kind of appreciate the beauty of it. I have a little Honda 80, or it's not an 80. I had an 80 when I was a kid, but it's like a 125 or something, and that's so much easier to drive to the Bull Taco. The Bull Taco is really hard to start. It's all the quirks. You guys are motorcycle people, so you know, but sometimes that slightly more exotic, beautiful thing is kind of a pain because whatever problem, you know.
Yes.
So
Between the creativity side is also the risk. You know, I think a lot of your writing and then your directorial work is risky. It's creative, but it's risky because you're asking people to go on this journey that is, it's it's visually driven, but also at the same time has wonderful dialogue that if you get in and enjoy the story. So what advice would you give to people that are maybe feeling a little bit risk adverse? You know, they're always trying to go for that shot, or they're trying to emulate a specific style, where for somebody like you who can jump between different stylistic approaches and just kind of seem to like, yeah, you're going to come with me on this journey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, thank you. I feel like that's a compliment. I mean, to me, risk is exciting, you know, and there's a you have to have a kind of a gut feel. I feel like I have a intuition, and maybe I've honed it over the years of working, but you kind of have a pretty good sense of what you can pull off. And for example, this Mozart in the Jungle episode I mentioned we shot in 16. The premise was that we brought an orchestra into Rikers jail, a real working jail at the time, and we were going to have them perform. This orchestra perform this piece of rather, some people believe, difficult classical music, very heady, conceptual classical music. And we were invited, so that was the premise. That the story was that the orchestra was coming to perform in the jail, and that's what we did in real life. And we actually had got special permission from the jail to go in and really do this for real. And it was very risky in that, like, what if the guy started booing, or what if the weather was kind of hot and instruments can lose their tuning. There's a lot of tricky things, and but it just felt like this is going to be stimulating and going to be and I got what I hoped to get, which is that the audience really responded to the music. So in a way there was a risk because, like, who knows what happened and stuff, but I was betting on something that I felt in my heart, which was, get out to this prison yard and you play incredible music. These are human people, even though maybe incarcerated or whatever, there's humans there that are going to appreciate that and going to sort of get something from the music that's going to enlighten them, or not enlighten them, but impress them, wash over them, to affect them. And it did. So in a way, as I'm speaking, it was a risk, but it's not all that risky because you just have faith in that, in kind of human people are going to respond that way. So I do think, I like risk, but not flagrant risk, like, oh, who knows what'll happen, but something, it's sort of like it's like a firework. You have the gunpowder, you have the thing, you put it in, you wrap it up, it's going to combust, and maybe this recipe hasn't been done precisely like that before, but you have a feeling that you're going to get that ignition. And that's kind of the basis that I do certain things, that you have a gut feeling, you put the elements together in such a way that you hope it's going to sort of combust. And it's true with actors. You put this actor and that actor, put them in a situation, you want something to happen. So to me, that kind of risk isn't really that risky because you're likely to get something good, and in projects I'm involved with, I'm always eager to have a sort of a kind of a surefire, like something like what's going to be funny, like what can we do that we know is going to sort of come off. And so it's funny because part of me is like, oh yeah, I like to take risks, but a lot of me is like, no, I want to have some surefire thing. But I think they sort of go hand in hand because with preparation and thought, that ignition, can come to pass if you invite it to, and you put a little thought into that combination. So my 2 cents, because you kind of asked for my advice, if people are wondering, oh, should I take a chance or whatever, I think you sort of can't afford not to. You have to take an intelligent chance, and you have to not be foolish and say, oh, I'm going to film something with only 10% of my battery life and my camera or whatever, but to give a charge, to give a possibility, something that could really spark and ignite is a great way to go about things. And, I did this thing, you might be aware of it, it was a video for Manson, tax law. We threw this money in a train station. So again, it was kind of risky and it was very kind of scary. It was, again, what's going to happen. But it was that kind of, gas, fire, oxygen, something's going to happen.
Right.
And it did. And so I think that there's that kind of intelligent risk that isn't foolhardy, but kind of strategic, that is probably a good place to look for, for filmmakers, like wondering how to negotiate that.
So I have one lingering question, since I am talking to a very innovative director. What, in your opinion, makes a good director? What, as far as certain things that are out there currently that have caught your attention as from another director or another influence?
It depends what kind of director, meaning if you want to be a sort of more work for hire director, so if I want to be a director in the field that you guys have experience doing motorsports, you could probably answer, well, you have to love motorcycles or not be afraid of driving fast or understand car mounts or whatever, there'd be a sort of group of things. So to not get too in the weeds about like the specifics, I think in general, having good taste is probably a key talent, because if you have good taste, you're discerning and you can find a good story and you can find good actors and find a good team. So, one example I use for that is there's a movie called A Single Man directed by he's a fashion designer,
Tom Ford?
Tom Ford, exactly. And he's a guy, world-class designer, but he's also a tastemaker, has a beautiful home and beautiful stores, and I'm not just talking about beauty, but I'm talking about like kind of tastefulness. And his movie was really well done, in my view, A Single Man. And I thought it kind of clicked for me, like, wow, that you're discerning and you kind of know, how to get the right people and put it together, that's something not really talked about. So I think if I was going to give advice to someone, there's obvious advice like learn certain skills and have a certain understanding of history and understand the basics of filmmaking, all this kind of stuff, which you can learn very quickly, in my view. But it's sort of hand in hand with being a well-rounded person, like understanding literature, appreciating culture, enjoying music, just stuff that is about being human and about the arts, but also, with an eye towards taste, which is kind of an extension of that, because someone like Tom Ford, who I don't really know, probably is well-read or is sensitive to movie history and so on. So anyway, I think that's just an interesting place to look. It's not like the end-all be-all, but developing taste through exposure and appreciation for things that interest you is probably a good thing to do.
Real quickly, what is your latest project that you've been working on or collaborating with? What should we be waiting or watching?
There's some things I'm involved with that I can't really speak to them yet, so I won't divulge those projects. I am potentially involved with the Mariah Carey Christmas special. She's doing a Christmas special this year, so I'm on the team sort of helping to shape that to a degree. So that's something that's on my plate. And I am hoping that during this time of a little more isolation that I can, like many people, find more hours in the day to do more personal writing and do another personal film as I had done in the past. So there's nothing really set, but I guess it's a little bit of a pep talk to myself to say, hey, that's something that means something to me. So hopefully that will come to pass. But that's a little smattering.
Excellent. Roman, thank you.
Good luck with your show. Hope it's appreciated, and be curious to see it when it's done.
Yes,
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Excellent.
All right. Bye, guys.